It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and texts for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is
The Hyperspace.
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and still only podcast. My name is Jared.
Hey, my name's Matt.
Where's Mike? Oh, don't be silly. Come on.
I mean, it's a Star Wars show. I mean,
this is a special bonus Star Wars episode. So, of course, Mike has nothing to do with it. But you know what?
Wait.
He's missing out.
He always misses out.
Because we've got...
Look, stop. He's missing out. He's missing out. Now, arguably, guys, and before we get to our special guest, I have to say this. Disney's arguably had some base hits, okay? But in the game, they've had some home runs too. And we're about to talk about one of the big home runs that Disney has put out. So he's really missing out on this discussion. I feel I've gotten off my chest.
All right. So with us to continue our Star Wars discussion tonight, we have with us from the Kenobi Chronicles and the Cassian Chronicles, Lindsey is
welcome back.
Hello.
And from the Cassian Chronicles and the Collector, he is a collector of rare antiques regarding Star Wars. We have with us our friend Brian. Welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Brian, welcome back, as always.
Oh, it's always fun.
So
we've had a lot of Star Wars shows in our run, haven't we?
Well, we have.
I like the Star Wars shows.
I feel like I've liked 50, more than 50, like 55% of them.
Wow, that's really
okay.
Wow.
So I think we just talked about Andor, which I think we all thought was really good.
Yeah.
I would imagine everyone here is a fan of The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Good old classic Star Wars.
Book of Boba Fett.
It had its moments.
I'll cherry pick.
It had its moments, most of which involved The Mandalorian.
Well,
yeah.
That's true.
Mandalorian season 2.5.
And I had that moment where I tried to explain that to someone who didn't watch it all, when I was trying to be like, okay, you could watch this and this and this. And they were like, but isn't Boba Fett The Mandalorian? And I was like, no, there's one episode. It was so annoying to explain it. I was like, this is stupid.
But but real quick, that is funny because in the Mandalorian season, one of the highlights was Boba Fett in the Mandalorian season.
When they introduced him in season 2, where he was just savage and like killing everyone.
Was amazing. And then one of the best moments in the Book of Boba Fett was the Mandalorian episode.
Yes.
So, I mean,
and it's interesting. I read comments from Tamora Morrison this week, as a matter of fact, where he was quite critical of season 1 of Boba Fett.
Oh, is that right?
And he said he goes, I just need to get back to being a badass. And that's what he said. And I was like, hey, listen to this man, please.
I think that's good advice.
And then we've had Kenobi. Now, Kenobi, I was 50-50 on Kenobi. There's the things I liked in there quite a bit. Ewan McGregor, of course. And I don't, you guys may feel very similar about it. Of course, Lindsey, you were part of the kind of the after show that we did.
Mm-hmm.
So I just felt like
that there was a really great movie in there somewhere.
Yes. And I feel like, I just felt bad talking to people about it because I felt like I was talking them out of enjoying it. And, I don't want to ever, pee in someone's pool. And, if they like something, then I'm happy for them. But There were some things in there I thought were pretty egregious, some directing choices, but anyways, this is turning into something else. What we should be talking about are Tales of the Jedi. And Tales of the Jedi are a
Oh
series
shit,
of
guys! I forgot to watch it. I'm kidding.
No, you
Sorry.
didn't.
I couldn't even.
get there?
Did I get you for a second, Jared?
like for 2 seconds.
Yes.
Go back and freeze that video on my face, and I'm like, but hey, here's a funny story about Mike. We did our cloning it in show about the Clone Wars, and we all sat down to record just like this.
Oh, that's right.
We sat down to talk about it, and Mike goes, "I haven't seen it yet." So Mike goes away, and Matt's like, "You know what? Screw this. Let's just record the episode without him. And if he comes back, because we didn't even know if he would come back." Right. So we were just like, so we actually recorded. He did come back after watching it. Like 30 minutes later, he reappears.
Oh, God.
And he's like, "Okay." And me and Matt had already finished our show.
Fresh
So
takes.
we just
Fresh
talked. Yeah, we just talked about it again. So, but see, you got me because that's happened to us before.
That's true.
It makes sense now. I was like, there's no way they'll buy this dumb joke on Matt, but I'm going to do it anyway.
I mean, if you hadn't watched it, why even show up?
Well, I
mean,
We're like a warning text, maybe like,
Yeah.
oh God.
Hey,
I think he just
45,
forgot what the
I
show was
forgot
going to
to
be
watch it.
about, and he just
yeah, it's possible.
But,
But that
you
was
know,
a very tumultuous
okay.
time in his life.
I'll give him
So,
a pass. I'll give him a pass.
Yeah. But hey, we're good here, and hopefully everyone has watched it. Lindsay.
I did watch it. I watched it yesterday.
Okay. And I rewatched today. So I would like to kind of take this, if possible.
Wait, whoa. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Oh,
There's people listening that haven't watched the show yet. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have not watched Tales of the Jedi, we're going to spoil everything. So,
spoiler
Barry?
Walkman is ready.
All right.
It's queued up to the spoiler alert. Here we go.
Yes. I said closer. Move in as close as you can and engage those stars to destroyers at close. I can't do it anymore.
Ah, crap. No, that's not it. Crap.
How about, look, there's modern technology. Just get a digital, man.
No.
Oh.
We roll analog here on the hyperspace. All right, I got it queued up. Here's the spoiler alert. Red alert. Here we go. We're going to spoil this. So if you haven't watched it, what's wrong with you? Why are you listening to the show?
It's true.
So kind of how I'd like to take this. The series was broken kind of into two distinct stories. We had the Ahsoka stories and the Dooku stories. So,
which, by the way, before we begin, this is kind of how they released it in terms of like how long these were. Reminded me of when they did, and Lindsay, I don't know if you know this, but when the Clone Wars first appeared, they released them digitally, and you could watch these little like 5-minute blips. And then after that, remember that, Jared? And then the movie came out.
yes, that was the hand-drawn Clone Wars.
So they had all these little and they were actually really pretty amazing.
I do remember those coming out. I never watched them, but I remember that now.
Yeah,
So-
I think they actually did drop those on Disney Plus. But
that's what this reminds me of, how they drop these little shorts like this. But
well, I mean, these are as I was
some are
watching,
shorter than others, but yeah.
rewatching today, some of these are like full on, 20, 25 minutes long, it seems like. But so I'd like to break it into two parts, just talk about Ahsoka all at once and then Dooku all at once.
Okay.
And I think what's interesting about what we're going to be talking about, one of the things is, Lindsay, this is sort of your first time like dipping your toe into like Star Wars animation like
Yes.
this.
Oh, is this the
Yes.
first animated stuff you watched?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
What did you think?
I loved it. I don't know if it was I was just emotional, but the first episode made me cry. I don't know. I really liked it.
That's okay. That's awesome, because I wasn't sure how this would land with you, since
when the big cat comes and she's like fighting for her baby, I was like, oh my God.
yeah.
And then I liked all of it. And then I proceeded to really enjoy all of it. But I was like, verklempt over an animal.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So I think we should start with Ahsoka since it sort of led off. It was the first episode in the order. Um, so Ahsoka has become kind of a big deal in Star Wars over the past 12 or 13 years. She was I will never forget going to the Clone Wars movie with Matt, and not just because of other things that happened in the theater.
It was a date.
It was not. But I remember we went in there with our friends, Mike. This is not the Mike from the show. This is
Sith
Mike,
Lord.
the Sith Lord, we call him.
Oh man.
And Mark, our good buddy, redheaded Mark from work, that Lindsay. And so the four of us, all in our 30s at the time, walk in to this theater on the first showing of the Clone Wars movie in 2008. And we are the oldest people
in a sea of children.
The only people in there are little kids and their moms. Seriously. And so we get our seats, and this lady behind us, actually, I think she was flirting with Matt, but she said, "Wow, you and the boys coming out to watch some Star Wars today, huh?" and we're like, yes. And Mike, the Sith Lord, he kind of, he talked a bit like a sailor, and he was talking like a sailor in the theater. And this same woman was like, "Hey, there's kids everywhere."
He was very, very into it, very emotional.
He's like,
she's like, I was okay with you guys coming in here, but if you're
but Mike's just he just started swearing, just talking, and she was like, "Hey, there's kids everywhere. What's the matter with you?" And
she was right. And she was
like,
right.
"Man, what is going on here?" I just felt uncomfortable.
Did he cool it?
Yeah.
It?
Oh yeah. He did.
After he got scolded by the mom.
Yeah, he apologized. But anyway, the thing about this movie experience, when we got out of the theater, I remember this specifically. Matt said, "You know what's interesting? Because this was our first look at Ahsoka. This was the first time she'd appeared in any media at all." And Matt's like, "I'm really curious about this character." And I've since shared that story with the actress who portrays her, Ashley Eckstein, who came to our mutual place of business one time. And she was gracious enough to talk to me for way longer than she should have. I told her this story, and I said, "I think my buddy Matt, he really realized your potential probably more than the rest of us did. Because I thought in the Clone Wars movie, she was kind of this 13-year-old kid, and she was, spunky and cool. And it's kind of got on my nerves. But I think Matt's like, I really want to know what happens to her because she's Anakin's apprentice, and something has to happen." And I will never forget that, Matt saying that in the parking lot. And her story as it evolved over the next decade or so has been really interesting and cool to see now that she has her own live action show coming out next year.
And, I think, even though I think, Star Wars has, and the characters and some very beloved characters have taken some interesting turns in Star Wars. I think her character, luckily, has had a true fixed star to guide her by, because I think her story has always been interesting. And I think her arc from start to finish has been very satisfying. So I think she's been a huge success as far as a newer character of Star Wars goes. I think they really, really treated her character well and wrote some really great stories with her. So I think, she could have been a real token kind of character. And to your point, Jared, she could have been very plucky and very overly witty in that device, but they made her so much more. And, she's still one of the most interesting characters, I think, in all of Star Wars.
They did a really good job of maturing her over time too.
Yeah.
She wasn't always that plucky little kid, later on. She actually grew up. And then, we're fortunate that she hadn't been killed off either.
Which, that's that is a bit of a spoiler, Lindsay, but her whole journey
she doesn't die.
Well, her whole journey, yeah, but I mean, you've seen her in Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian, but her whole journey is really, I mean, I hope it's something you have maybe some interest in going back and revisiting, because the way that's handled in the Clone Wars is really awesome.
I think watching this made me more interested in watching that. And I also feel like I've absorbed through Star Wars cultural osmosis information about her storyline already, sort of.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I had seen something about Tales of the Jedi that was like talking about how that episode where Anakin's training her, what was the name of that episode?
It's
Practice Makes Perfect.
Practice Makes Perfect. How in the end he trains her to fend off the thing that he does, which is activating the clones to try to kill her. And I was like,
yes.
So actually, I'd heard that, and after I watched the episode, I like YouTube that scene.
What's really interesting about how Lindsay watched it now, it's kind of like how when we saw the original Star Wars and then the prequels came out, you're going into the prequels with a lot of the answers, but all the questions. So Lindsay can now go into the Clone Wars with a lot of the answers and find out what, and have a lot of questions and see all this stuff come together. So I'm excited for you to watch the animated. Actually, you can't go wrong with any of the animated series, to be quite honest. Well, most of them.
Well, Resistance, you can totally take a pass on.
I haven't even watched season 2 of Resistance.
But like Rebels, Bad Batch, Clone Wars, they're all stellar. Stellar.
And those are the Bad Batch is essentially it's a direct continuation of the Clone Wars.
Okay.
And because it picks up at Order 66.
So good.
And it's the same animation style and everything. So there's a continuity there.
Awesome.
I derailed this, guys. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and where's Rebels? I was like, we're talking about this now.
Rebels starts the same time as Andor.
Yeah.
It starts 5 years before New Hope. And I guess I mean, in retrospect, kind of will parallel what's going on. I would be shocked if there wasn't some kind of Rebels crossover in Andor season 2, to be honest.
Rebels turned out to be a much bigger and better show than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sorry, guys. We're talking about Ahsoka and how awesome she is.
Well, this was literally the beginning of her journey, Ahsoka. Yes. I mean, we see her born. I thought it was interesting, and something I noticed when I watched this today. The Togruta people obviously have their heads are, and I was thinking, man, how do they get dressed? But I noticed in every scene, people they pull on their clothing like around them. Nothing goes like a t-shirt that goes over their head.
That'd just be a mess.
They all have, like button up or, something that fastens in the front.
Makes sense.
If that's your species, you probably never even think to make
a
piece of clothing that goes over your
It's
head.
always been that way.
It's exactly. And that's a dumb thing I just noticed today, but
she does have her pointy hood in the last episode. I noticed that her hood's got little points in it when she takes it down.
Oh, it does. Yeah. I guess they build that in, but
that just shows the attention to detail with the button-up shirts and the big heads,
Sure. And I think this first episode, I mean, obviously it's a very simple premise. The mother goes off with Ahsoka. I'm curious why you would take your infant hunting with you.
I thought the same
because
thing.
It's custom. Because it is custom, Jared.
Okay. So
that's all they need to say.
And I thought that I remember watching that and I was like, holy crap. When they kill that deer and it's just sitting there and I'm like,
dying.
Okay. And she's just like, look at it. You have to look at it. And I was like, oh wow, this is a little dark, like right off the bat. But
yeah.
Wasn't that a Kaibuck or something?
I forget what they called it.
Yeah.
I watched it with a Kaibuck.
Yeah, there's an action figure with Yoda riding one of those things.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. But I think when I was watching it, I kind of figured out what was going to happen. because when this tiger takes off with a young Ahsoka, and I'm like, well, she doesn't die, and this is where she's going to sort of kind of innately find her skill with the Force.
And I was like, I guess she makes it back to her parents because she knows her name. So I was like, at least one of her parents survives.
Does she?
Yeah, they both do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then they're like, and then I was interested to see like the process where children are decide to go to the Jedi as babies, and they just skip right over that.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that you never really hear about, the abduction of the children, right?
Or are they abducted?
Well, because I feel like they have to the parents have to be like, here you go, Jedi. We don't know how to deal with Jedi babies. And then the Jedi are like, cool, just so you know, you'll never see them again.
Well,
yeah, our babies keeps knocking stuff off the shelf from across the room and hitting us in the head.
Yeah, like, I'm done with this kid. You take her, Yoda.
I've tried to exercise her 10 times, but
well, I mean, because we've never seen that process except with Anakin, and he was older, and he, that was a whole different thing. But it's different, I guess, handing over your 1-year-old, and so I don't know what the process for saying, okay, well, I'm going to give my child to the Jedi Order because they, obviously they possess certain powers. And
well, maybe I would have to assume that the general opinion of the Jedi and being a part of it is a great honor to be a part of that kind of system. So anyone who shows that kind of inclination would be, the family would be probably very proud to be turning their kid over to that order. I'm assuming, because the Jedi, well, as we find out in this series, maybe don't have the best opinion in the universe, but
sure.
But I would think maybe leading up to this point, maybe they've established a very well-rounded reputation where parents would be very willing to be like, I'm proud to hand them over.
Yeah. And I wonder,
there seems to be almost like, my kid's a Jedi. What do your kid do?
Well,
security. Yeah. Okay.
The village elder, the lady, she seemed to have some, almost Jedi-like herself, in kind of identifying what was going on with Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
Right off the bat with the animation, I thought, like, this Clone Wars style of animation just gets better every time I see it. Like, there are parts in the episode, and this has been the case with Clone Wars for a few years, where sometimes until you see the very stylized, characters, if you're just looking at a landscape or a ship or droids, it's indistinguishable from live action almost.
Yeah. That I don't mean to skip ahead, but that Inquisitor at the end looked real.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
And he was way cooler than any Inquisitors in Obi-Wan.
Yes, why couldn't we have gotten that in Obi-Wan? God. Because that
he looked straight up like a Sith Lord. He looked like a Sith. Like,
he went down like a punk, though.
Yeah.
But he sort of did.
And Ahsoka literally was like one.
Like his own lightsaber.
Yeah, he's like, hey, wait a second. But so there, as far as plot goes, there's not a whole lot to that first episode with her. She spends some time with the saber-toothed tiger in his cave, and she rides him back to her village, and so that's kind of her first adventure, really. And we pick up. The next episode is Practice Makes Perfect. And it's good that you watched, you sort of got some context on this one, Lindsey.
Yeah, I was like, I'll go back. I think I'm going to go back and watch all of it. But in that moment, I was like, I got to see the parallel.
So in this episode, Anakin, who once again, they brought back the actor Matt Lanter to voice Anakin as he did all through the series. And James Arnold Taylor did Obi-Wan. She just keeps getting her butt kicked by these clones for like hours.
Yeah.
Like they keep. I wonder, does it? Is there permanent damage if you get stunned that many times?
Right. Yeah, they seemed pretty concerned about it. And Anakin's like, yeah, she'll be all right.
God.
After she gets dropped for the 20th time.
Yeah, he's like, it's fine.
If you're unconscious for that long, not sleeping, unconscious for that long.
But notice
can't be
she's
good.
building up tolerance to it because he says you're only out 5 minutes that time or something.
Oh yeah, she's getting better, and
immunizing her.
And that's the Anakin we see in this episode. I think this is a little. This seems to be kind of early in the timeline of the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is only like 2 years long, but this is when she's a bit younger than we see her at the end of the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. The end of the episode is sort of a lost scene from the Clone Wars season 7, where her and Captain Rex are trapped on that Star Destroyer, which is immediately after Order 66. So they've got a Star Destroyer full of clones who are going to be trying to kill them. And we see that this is paid off in some way. And you said it nicely, Lindsey, earlier, like Anakin was training her for eventually something that he would help bring about. So,
and I think, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think it froze a little for me just there. Clearly I'm having a lot of technical success this episode. At the end when she's like walking out with her hands behind her head and it ends there.
Yeah.
And then, so in the show, does what happens after that? Is that in the show?
You see her coming out of the doors.
Got it.
Yes,
that's your scene.
I never saw that. I
you
never
get behind the scenes. Yeah.
Okay, because Rex is pretending that she is his prisoner, because Order 66, Rex gets.
I did see that. I saw.
He gets he gets the chip, which is a chip that's in all clones. He gets his deactivated, so he's not susceptible to the Emperor anymore. So he doesn't have to follow orders. Yeah. But so they're about to begin a charade. I'm going to bring out Ahsoka, and then like all hell breaks loose, and there's a whole bunch of crap that happens, which I recommend you check out because it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I noticed that during this training she was doing, there was a bit of a time jump in there somewhere because they changed locations.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. They were in this dark room before, then all of a sudden they're in a well-lit area, and it looks like, Anakin's there watching, but it looks like she instigated the training and that she's very interested in to keep this training going because, she gets knocked out and she's like, I could go. Rex is like, oh, you did 5 minutes that time. Great job. And she's, I can do better. And, it just shows kind of her drive and, her ability just to keep going and to, slog through all this. She can just grind.
Yeah. And she certainly does.
There's no quit in that girl.
Mm-hmm.
No. With practice makes perfect coming to an end, we go to Resolve, which is probably my favorite episode of the Ahsoka part of the show. Mm-hmm. And we start with at Padme's funeral, which is an interesting place. We get a Mon Mothma cameo, which, of course, having seen Andor, is a little more meaningful.
Yeah.
So it's like, holy cow, I know this lady now. And we get our good friend Bail Organa is there in this sort of semi-deleted scene from Revenge of the Sith that we never saw in live action, obviously. So what'd you guys think of this particular episode?
Oh, man.
It was all right. I turned it off.
Yeah, it was so good.
I really liked it. I liked how, I think what initially a long time ago made me not, I don't know why at the age I was, I don't know. I wasn't as into the Clone Wars and the stuff because I knew it had this Padawan for Anakin, and I was like, none of this is in the movies. It feels like they just put it in there, and none of it ever pays off because you don't see any of it in the movies. Sure. And so I just didn't consider it canon, but like was like, like I don't. This isn't part of the story to me. Mm-hmm. But I like that this brought her into the prequels, into that moment where she risks going to the funeral, the scene that we've seen in the because having not seen the Clone Wars, I'm like, why do we never see this character in episode 3?
Mm-hmm. So. Well, it's interesting. There's an interesting line that she says, and Bail's like, why did you come here? And she's like, because she was my friend. That's an interesting relationship in the Clone Wars, in that, she's Anakin's apprentice, but her and Padme have a few adventures in the Clone Wars, which is interesting because, Anakin and Padme are still very much keeping their stuff on the DL, but Ahsoka is not an idiot, and she knows. She kind of figures out what's happening.
Friendship's a recurring theme for her too, it seems like. With Ahsoka throughout the Clone Wars and all the other material that we've seen. It just seems, friendship is always important to her.
Well, yeah, she always comes back to, it's interesting that in the book of Boba Fett, when she's hanging out with Luke, and I think that's a fascinating, and she's even says, hey, you're just like your dad in one scene in that show, which was like blew my mind. Can you hear my dog trying to get into my room?
I did hear that.
Scratching punk.
What I liked about Resolve was, Ahsoka's kind of gone underground,
yes.
And much like in the Obi-Wan series, where Obi-Wan on Tatooine has done the same thing, this is much more interesting. Her story has a lot more interaction, and even though Obi-Wan's supposed to be a hermit, and that was fine, it's interesting to watch Ahsoka with others outside of the Jedi Order and stuff after she's left the Order. Spoiler alert, Lindsey.
I didn't. Well, because I think I knew that too, because it's why she's still his Padawan by episode 3.
I like seeing her make those moral choices over and over again. Even though she's pulled herself out of the Jedi Order, this is kind of something that she has like I said, she really does have a fixed star, and she really is a good Jedi. And if Order 66 and the Emperor had never happened, or this is a couple hundred years in the past, Ahsoka probably would have been one of the best Jedi, because she had the drive, she had the focus, she believed in what she was doing, and she's generally a very good moral Jedi. And everywhere she goes, that goes with her. Unfortunately, where she's going, problems follow her now too, of course, as a Jedi.
She might be more Jedi tand a lot of the Jedi.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it reminded me of that scene in Obi-Wan where that guy at the Tatooine restaurant, bar and grill, gets found because he can't help but help the people there.
Right.
Yes.
And Obi-Wan won't do that, where that guy gets caught and dies because of it. And now Ahsoka also gets caught because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was thinking of that line by the Inquisitor in Kenobi. It's like an itch.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when she helps that kid out from getting crushed by hay bales.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so it's interesting too that, obviously Bail gave her some kind of communications device, which apparently I'm imagining
gives those out like candy.
I know.
I
That's
know.
the
He's like
same
a catalyst that brings everybody back.
God,
that's the same thing that he did to Obi-Wan.
This is a big secret.
For all the Jedi.
I know. Once again, Bail Organa ruining everything.
It might be just flat out Bail's fault that
he's just handing
no
out these Jedi burner phones. Here.
You don't know where I am.
Like, this is why Leia isn't good at like the espionage part, where she's like, I'm just on diplomatic mission, and Darth Vader's like,
literally.
Rogue One puts that whole scene into totally because Vader, hey, look, I just killed like 20 of you idiots who were trying to stop me.
I've got your license plate. I was right there.
He goes, I watched you flee. So anyway, but so it's interesting that she contacts Bail. Oh, after, of course, the Inquisitor, who was awesome and really cool looking.
Oh, by the way, real quick, Jared, you mentioned it earlier. The animation in like this show sometimes is like off the chart. There, when she's facing off with the Inquisitor, and there's like everything's on fire behind them. It looks like a movie. It looks like live action. It looks like real fire.
Yeah.
It might be real fire for all I know, but it was incredible. The animation.
What I thought was really cool there was when he was, kind of stalking her, dragging his lightsaber along, and it showed like a shot of, almost like from her perspective, from a lower perspective. You see his robe, like his hood, and it's fluttering in the wind like it really would. And that just sold me on it. I was just like, man, that is so good.
I like the lightsaber drag when it's like sparking on the ground and everything. That was really cool. And once again, that punk who sold her out,
and he should have got his head lopped off.
And
he spared him though.
Yeah, she knocked him out of the way, and the Inquisitor was the Inquisitor was voiced by Clancy Brown, who was a very famous voiceover actor. Done a lot of Star Wars,
a lot of animated Star Wars.
Yes, and also
in the Highlander.
He was in the Highlander. He was also, of course, Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob SquarePants. So it's weird too when she kills him. It's like he deflates. Did you notice that when his
little head or something?
Like it was just like it's like I don't know what kind of creature he was.
Yeah, but, under that, if that was his, because I was gonna say I like the tradition of going back to occasionally having like the dark side people wearing those creepy masks. I don't know if they do that a lot. When they do it, I really.
No, I don't. I think, and I do think that was a mask, although it did look like it could have been some kind of alien creature. But it was like a bone, kind of.
Yeah, you think of Grievous.
Yeah, a little bit of General Grievous,
and it might have been based on. I think there was a Macquarie concept of Grievous or something that's a little bit different than what Grievous looks like. It's a little more organic looking, kind of like that mask was.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, was it Darth Nihilus? I don't remember. From
Nihilus,
the Knights of the Republic 2, the one that's on the cover. That's like a cool Sith mask on that too. That reminded me of this. It was like white with.
I'll have to Google that.
Eyes.
I don't remember that.
I could have gotten that name wrong. I don't know.
I mean, this Inquisitor is not randomly designed, so he's obviously being,
Looks sick.
Yeah, there's some kind of homage somewhere to this character. So,
well, it's interesting that this chain of events brings Bail Organa to this planet, driving his giant Tantive 4 spaceship. When he was landing that thing, I was like, man, I hope there's room. This is a pretty big ship you're just coming in and landing. But I think we see this is the point where Ahsoka goes from where we left her in Clone Wars to where we find her in Rebels. She's a spoiler, Lindsay, sorry. She does show up in Rebels.
Some epic Rebels stuff.
Yeah. So she, this is the point where she kind of joins the rebellion. Because he's like, "Are you ready to get back in the fight?" And she gives that little nod at the end of the episode, and that's the beginning of many new adventures. Which
don't feel bad about spoiling a show that has been out that I have.
No, that's okay.
I have chosen not to watch.
So well, I know
we have the spoiler alert out. That counts for you too.
Yeah.
Red alert.
So the Ahsoka arc in this great short series was fantastic. It was great.
Yeah. And it was it definitely
filled in
showed
a lot of the white space on her life.
One note about that family that they say that she saved with Bail. I'm assuming they went to Alderaan.
Oh man,
no.
Dang
for them.
Maybe they've got like a relocation program.
Bale's like, I've got this nice house for you all set up. Man, that's
10 years later.
That's kind of a downer. Oh, it's interesting
point,
too.
though.
In that episode, Resolve, if you on Naboo, she goes to Naboo in a Y-wing starfighter with Captain Rex, and that is the Y-wing that she steals, that they steal from that Star Destroyer at the end of the Clone Wars. So I don't know how much. Well, it's not much longer at all. I mean, Padme's funeral is so. The last like 5 or 6 episodes of the Clone Wars, Lindsey, are masterfully woven into Revenge of the Sith. Like, we know what Anakin and Obi-Wan are doing, but now we get to find out what Ahsoka is doing during the events of the movie. And it's I think Clone Wars season 7 again is another home run for Disney, the Disney era, because that season, well, most of that season, there's some stinkers in there, but those last 4 episodes, I mean, that should have been a theatrical release. It was just fantastic. So we're gonna circle back here to the Dooku stuff, and I've talked to Matt and Brian a little bit about this, but I'm sorry my dog keeps trying to get in my room. That's the scratching you hear. The story of Dooku was dramatically sort of underserved in the movies.
Completely.
And although he was given a very interesting backstory in those films, like he's a Jedi who said, I'm done with this, I'm walking away. And then he becomes a Sith Lord. Well, what made him that way? Why did that happen? It's almost in its way another Anakin story, where you had this good person who, although I don't think Dooku was so much manipulated as he came to see the world through his own experience. Anakin was manipulated. Dooku learned
disillusioned.
Disillusioned. He learned all this himself through his experiences. And
he found someone who said, I agree and I have a solution.
Correct. And the first episode of his story, Justice, is called. We find him on a mission with his Padawan, young Qui-Gon, voiced by Liam Neeson's son.
I didn't know that. That's so cool.
That's cool.
Because it's funny you say that. I didn't know that until after the episode, and it sounds a lot like him, but I'm like, it's different enough, but it's so similar. I kept thinking, is that him? And they're just tweaking his voice for this, but no, it was his son. But
and they obviously brought Liam Neeson in for a future episode.
Right.
How cool was it that we got to see Dooku and Qui-Gon on a mission together?
I know.
I mean, that's something that we never thought we would have ever seen.
No, that would have been relegated to like the comics or the books or something.
Right.
As far as this series goes, I think the Dooku series, the Dooku part of it was my favorite.
I have to go kill my dog.
Okay, go through.
I'll be right back. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Welcome back.
Hello.
Hi.
So I think the Dooku stories in this series were my favorite. I mean, the Ahsoka were great, but the Dooku were really fascinating for me.
I agree. They did a lot with a few. They was the majority of the episodes, but they were short. I feel like they did a lot with a little bit.
Yeah, and they filled in some nice gaps in the prequels.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I
important things, not just junk. It was really good stuff.
And I thought it was interesting too, because Dooku, I mean, as we have three of us have watched the entire Clone Wars and Rebels series. We've gotten a lot of Ahsoka. I mean, we know a lot about her, but Dooku, even though he was in the Clone Wars a great deal, there were very few times where we got into his head. He had a few standout episodes in the Clone Wars, but by and large, he's still kind of this unknown just empty field that we don't know a whole lot about. And I thought it was interesting, as you said, to see him on a mission with Qui-Gon. Also was interesting to see how he just gradually loses patience with everything that's going on around him until he finally is like, you know what? I'm going to kill all these fools. Or at least, well, I mean, he does. He's holding them and choking like 3 of them at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts to become, it's about his disillusionment.
And I think sorry.
No, please.
I was gonna say, I think having not watched the other Clone Wars stuff, and I feel like I always had kind of a progression of Anakin to the dark side problem with the prequels. I don't think it was very smooth, whatever. This was a really interesting look at how Dooku talks about how like Qui-Gon is like open-minded and has different ideas than the rest of the Jedi, and how he admires that about Qui-Gon, and that's why Qui-Gon chooses Anakin. And you can just see how like the dark side kind of influences all of that to lead Anakin to being trained as a Jedi when maybe he never really should have been.
That little trickle down.
Yeah, coming all the way from Dooku to Qui-Gon to Obi-Wan to Anakin.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I mean, it's almost like Dooku is, I guess, kind of like Anakin's grandpa in some ways, because he trained Qui-Gon and Qui-Gon found Anakin. I think these 3 episodes with Dooku, each one presents a pivotal moment for him. Like, I guess, Qui-Gon looks like he may be 20 years old or so in this. So we're talking, what?
Sorry. The first scene he has, I'm like, it's so funny. He's got like no undershirt. He's just got the Jedi robes with like the deep V.
Oh, you talking about Qui-Gon?
Yeah, that's what I thought you said.
He's young, man. He's feeling it. So he's like,
I was like, it's just really funny to me.
Like,
I thought you said Qui-Gon when he was like 20. I was like, yeah, he looks like he's like 20.
Yeah, man. He was, he's a healthy young Jedi Irishman who's but each episode presented an incident, I think, which was very important for Dooku's the path that he eventually chose. And in this first episode, it's interesting. I think it was funny. They walk into this bar, again, saloon. What is it? A restaurant?
It's a cantina, man.
A cantina. That's it. And Dooku instantly puts together all these people are the kidnappers. They all kidnapped this senator's son. And so he starts to see like, okay, well, the Republic sent us here to just go get this kid. And Dooku's convinced they don't understand the reasons behind this. They just want to get the kid back. And he's like, no, well, look around. This place is a trash heap.
And there's an idea that they then carry over into the second Dooku episode from this one, which I liked how they matured it a little bit. But go on. No. And what is the progression of that? Well, in the next episode, which I think that was the second episode with Dooku was they're all great, but I think it was my favorite one with Mace Windu. They travel to a planet, Mace and him, on a mission to investigate the death of a Jedi. And what they find it was kind of an inside job for the people that they're there to kind of like protect. They find out that they're behind it. And what you start getting is you start hearing for the first time the general opinion of the Jedi is not stellar across the galaxy. And again, that's what you saw with the noble son that was kidnapped by the townspeople. They said, the Jedi are the tools of the rich, and they go to protect the elite and the wealthy's interest across the galaxy. That's what they become, like enforcers of ideals of the rich and elite to protect this kind of bubble that they exist in. And that's what they were sent to do in the first episode, to go get this rich kid back. And the rich kid was like, hey, look, no, there's real problems here that nobody's seeing. But the only reason they were sent was because they had to save a rich kid. And and again, even in the Phantom Menace, they're there to bust open the
to
trade,
smooth over this trade
broker a
thing.
deal,
because
or,
don't
you know.
stop commerce, man. There's lots of people losing money right now. We got to get the credits flowing again. So I think they were on to something really interesting there, and I like the angle that Dooku was waking up to see that maybe what we're doing is not necessarily as noble as we thought. And I think that plays in very well to the fall of the Jedi and how people were almost okay to watch the Jedi fall down a bit, and it was just, I liked how they did that, and Dooku's character, I think, was one of those. I mean, there was the Lost 12,
the Lost 20,
which, by the way, I'm a little confused why they have the busts of the Lost 20 in the
library.
Library. Like, that's a weird thing to celebrate, but
what's the Lost 20?
Those are the Jedi who willingly just walked away from the Order.
Is another real weird enigma about Star Wars. You have 20 Jedi that stepped away from the Jedi Order, and I don't know, was it all around the same time?
I don't know. I mean, it is interesting why they would be celebrated. Like, oh, this is.
I thought because I didn't know. I thought maybe they died and it was a memorial, but no.
No, these are people who said, I don't want to be a Jedi anymore.
Yeah.
And apparently it's an extremely rare thing for that to happen, because you got to think thousands and thousands of years of the Jedi, and only 20 people have walked away from it.
So, and like Cypher Dyas, was Cypher Dyas in there too? Or I don't know. I don't know. But anyways, Dooku is one of the Lost 20 that stepped away from the Jedi Order. But, you never really kind of see the progression of why he did it. I mean, in the Clone Wars cartoon, you kind of get an inkling of it, and if you read some of the novels, you get a better understanding. But I liked how they did this. He's throughout his entire career on the ground, he's getting more and more feedback from the ground level than most of the Jedi were getting from the Council. Which, by the way, I liked how they turned that. How Mace Windu wound up being on the Council because of choices to go with the program versus questioning the program, in a sense.
Yes.
Which just kind of made Mace or Dooku even more agitated.
Yeah.
With the situation.
He asked Mace, he goes, did you know that you were in the Council before this mission started? And he's like, no, I was as surprised as you are.
He's like, but I followed all the rules and you didn't. So what do you think was going to happen?
Yes.
Fascinating way of making it happen. I like it.
And you see in that episode with him and Mace, how Mace is, Mace is very by the book. Because, Dooku starts to lose his temper again. And he's like, Dooku, stand down. Stop. All Mace wants to do is go and pick up that Jedi's body and return it to Coruscant.
Yeah.
But Dooku's like, no, I want to know why this happened.
Yeah, he wanted the full-scale investigation.
I know. Why was she killed? And why did these people kill her? That's what I want to know.
Exactly.
And Mace is like, nope.
I like how he tries to appeal to him. Like, if you died, wouldn't you want someone to come find out what happened to you? And Mace is like, no.
Well, Mace,
he would.
He
Mace, really would.
You just wait. Your turn's coming, sir.
Yeah.
We know what happened to you.
It shows you that the Force had gone out of balance completely. Like, the Jedi weren't as noble and as good as, and not intentionally, but their mission had changed a bit. And
their rules were like not necessarily good rules. They were just rules to have rules.
It was a bureaucracy and became an organization to itself versus versus a dogma. It became an organization, and like any complex organization, it has its problems. I mean, look at Andor, man. They can't get stuff done, man. It goes through 83 levels of bureaucracy before it gets done.
Well, it's interesting. The fight in choices, that really turns ugly. Like, there's a lot of people that get killed there. I like when he uses a tree, I think, he cuts down a tree and uses a tree to like smash some people. That was cool.
Yeah.
But they collect their fallen Jedi comrade, and I thought it was interesting. Like, I know that Qui-Gon was cremated, and the way this Jedi is laid to rest. She's put in a slab in the floor, and then this beam of light goes through her. And I wonder if they're disintegrating the body. And they did it this way on Naboo just because they didn't have one of these super lasers that can burn your body. But I don't know. These are the things I think about when I'm watching these shows.
Yeah, could be.
I wonder, did they leave that in their Jedi will and testament? She was like, I would like to be in the laser tube.
Well,
and it was like, I would like.
See, I thought it was more like maybe
no pyre,
more symbolic,
laser
just
tube.
the symbolic of the lights.
That could be. I mean, it was definitely an interesting thing we really hadn't seen before. And so in the Sith Lord, which is the name of his final episode,
that had one of my favorite moments in it.
Okay, we'll throw it out, man. We're talking about
a racing Camino, because I mean that is a direct hardcore tie-in
to
the prequels,
episode 2.
Yes,
they can't know. And so we are seeing here there's some evidence Dooku's already been turned, or he's already chosen to ally himself with Palpatine.
And that's what you see him walking down, by the way, is the busts of the Lost 20. He's already right. Isn't that where he goes right past?
Yeah, he goes to the library. Yeah. And apparently it's very easy to erase something.
Not to mention there's like no 3 buttons.
It doesn't have to be that high.
Well,
and no record of who erased it, like a deleted file record.
Yeah. This is why physical media matters.
Because you need a hard copy.
I see what you're doing. I understand.
He's poking at Matt there. So he goes and erases Camino, and this is really before we understand that he's probably meeting with Palpatine pretty regularly, because when they meet up at the end, there's definitely a familiarity there. Like, this is the first time they've gone to this burned out section of Coruscant and
How
hung
do you think
out.
they found each other? You think they found him like a imperial dating app?
Well, he is Senator Palpatine, so he would have been met that way, and then the same way he did with Anakin, he was probably like, so
yes,
Jedi, pretty wild that they do this, huh?
Well, I mean,
check out my secret layer in my robes.
Well,
yeah.
Well,
let me slip into something more comfortable for our meeting.
Palpatine was already he was already playing his long game at this point, and I think this episode actually happens during the Phantom Menace, because we see Qui-Gon fresh from Tatooine after he's fought Darth Maul, and like the whole place is abuzz, like, oh, Qui-Gon fought a Sith Lord
on some backwater planet. Sure, he did.
Yeah, and like as him and Dooku are walking down the hall, like you see like a bunch of Jedi, and they're all kind of murmuring, and he's like, Dooku says something. He's like, Qui-Gon's like, yeah, news travels fast, and so I thought that was really interesting, placing this scene right in the middle of the Phantom Menace. It's essentially a scene that we didn't see, and we get Yaddle, who is interestingly voiced by Bryce Dallas Howard.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
So Bryce is she's becoming quite the Star Wars person, directing episodes of Mando, and
going.
She's voicing Yaddle. But yeah, Yaddle was interesting because obviously it's one of Yoda's. Yaddle is one of 3 people from Yoda's species that we've seen. And of course, she was in the Phantom Menace very, very briefly, just sort of kind of a background puppet character. I think having her, I mean, she's the final kind of domino that falls in Dooku's fall to the dark side. One of my favorite moments in the episode is when, after Qui-Gon has been killed, Dooku's sitting at that tree.
Yeah, that's very memorable.
Yeah, and he's like, I used to bring Qui-Gon here as a boy, and it's hard, you don't think of like but in a lot of ways, the Padawan master relationship is sort of like a parental relationship, because they're kind of paired up when these children are very young, and so Qui-Gon was probably like his son, and it's interesting to have that kind of like thoughtful moment with him, just like I used to bring him here as a boy, and he's on Coruscant, he had never seen a tree before, and he was completely fascinated by it. And
did you notice that music when they were when he was at the tree was very reminiscent of like the field in Gladiator?
Oh, okay, I see. Well, first of all,
Fields.
I love the music in this series.
Oh, it's
absolutely, and it is currently available to stream on whatever streaming platform you like. But the music was great. And Qui-Gon's, I like when Dooku says, "I wouldn't be very good company." When Yaddle invites him to Naboo. And then, of course, he goes and meets with someone very bad.
Hey, wait, before we go there.
No, please. I'm talking a lot. You guys just holler it out.
All right. So go back to the conversation between Qui-Gon and Dooku.
Yes.
You notice that Qui-Gon builds up Obi-Wan in that conversation a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a direct callback to episode 2 when Dooku and Obi-Wan are sitting there, Obi-Wan's all, incapacitated, and Dooku's like, "Oh, your master spoke highly of you." And
yeah, there you go.
It's just another beautiful tie-in to
deep cut
what we've seen.
Well, something that struck me as odd is that Dooku never met Obi-Wan. I mean, they all
it's kind of weird.
How many years has that been?
Well,
probably
I think Obi-Wan was with Qui-Gon for at least 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And if they all live in this, this giant building behind me, you'd think their paths would have crossed, but I don't know. I mean, certainly it's possible. I mean, there's thousands of Jedi living at that place. And
I mean, I'm sure they don't all live there 24/7. I'm sure
it's like his It's like his grandson Jedi.
Sure,
like,
it would be
really.
It would be like
the estranged grandfather that really only came around.
Well, I think Dooku certainly
sent cards only.
Well, he certainly would have taken an interest once Qui-Gon had a Padawan, like because that's Qui-Gon's like his son, and it's like, hey, what's going on? Introduce me to this person. But
but you know what? He could have been well past the whole rigmarole and game of that. He might have been just like already plotting and planning his future. He's like, I'm already done with this whole system.
That's true. Because the next scene, we find him going to a beautifully animated, rundown part of Coruscant.
I love his bunker where he holds up. I think that part of Coruscant always fascinates me.
Was it's all dirty and run down
because Coruscant is this glitzy, glamorous, neat place that you see. Of course, there's the lower levels which are shady, but like I like seeing like the hardcore, rundown, industrial like area like where he hangs. That's just cool.
Yeah, in that hangar, the backdrop there with that opening looks like a giant evil smile with just nasty teeth.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about it that just, is just evil, just like Palpatine.
Yeah. And of course, we get our good buddy Ian McDermott is back.
Oh, yeah.
He loves to pay the rent, that guy. Any opportunity.
They did such a good job making him truly, for an animated show, really making him look like he looks so evil. It was so good. I was like, I'm really buying which I don't always buy, that he feels evil. Sometimes he feels like silly evil.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, the last shot of the show after he kills Yaddle, it just cuts to Palpatine and he starts to smile Like,
Yeah.
which
It,
If
that's
you look
good
at him
stuff.
when they're fighting, he's just
was.
sitting back there nodding. He's
and
just
like laughing. He like when Dooku like flings the ship away, he just starts like like
Is it
laughing.
bad to say that? I mean, and I hate saying this, but like, I was kind of glad to see Yaddle.
she was a little too curious.
I mean, you know why? Because I always thought
Oh
the
my
puppet
God.
was kind of ridiculous looking, and there wasn't enough like story where I cared about her. So I'm kind of glad she
Oh my
got offed.
God. I'm not glad.
Well,
I wouldn't
I
say
wouldn't
I'm
say
glad. I thought her hair was weird. I was like, that's
Yeah.
very like human-esque looking hair on this.
Just a good character to go.
Well,
had to get rid of one.
I thought it was pretty brutal how she died though. Like I was like, thought it was brutal just right off when she got crushed, and then when she gets out, I was like, oh my! I looked like, oh my God!
Yeah,
she got out, and then she just like can't get up, and then he kills her.
Well,
she's again.
Yeah, she's just like totally helpless.
It's brutal.
And he walks up to her and seals the deal.
I'll give you peace.
And it's funny.
Oh
yes, I will give you peace.
That was hardcore.
And it's funny, Brian, what you said that apparently that's Palpatine's MO. If you think about Return of the Jedi, he's doing the same thing with Luke and Vader. He's just like, yeah, good.
And it is pretty indirect. It sounds like so far Dooku's actions, like he's made decisions and like allowed things to happen that have resulted in someone dying. But this is the first time he has to outright like take someone out himself that he knows.
Yes,
and
he comes out of the shadows.
Yeah, and it's like a line. He's already crossed all the lines, but like it's another line.
His first. But he seems when he meets up with Palpatine initially, he's like, Darth Maul killed Qui-Gon. And he's pissed. Mm-hmm. He's like, this is not the way it was supposed to go. He goes, we could have brought Qui-Gon with us. And he's like, you've lost an apprentice and so have I.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well.
Yeah, because
move on.
But I think when Qui-Gon goes there, when Dooku goes there, he's angry. He's like, this didn't have to happen. And
again, Dooku is, he's a tragic character is what he is, because he, in the end, he follows his morals to what he feels is truly right. Whereas Palpatine is completely like long game and nefarious and has a plan and a design for what he wants to happen. Dooku is approaching this from his heart, thinking like, I need to make changes and I need to be a part of this change because things aren't going the right way.
Yeah.
So, he's a true tragic character. And I don't think you've really ever got that kind of impression, or at least that exposure of his character up to this point, where I really feel bad for him, because I think he's made these choices up to this point because some of them have to have evil actions to be able to move forward with this choice, like all rebellions do. He just had to make that tough moral choice. He had to make sacrifices, much like what we see Luthen and Andor.
Yes,
in a different way. He's making choices against his nature to progress what he feels is the necessary means to get to the right end.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Palpatine, this is just a long game, and he's playing these people like chess.
Yes, I think that's exactly. He's the puppet master, and I think he sees that in Dooku. With Dooku, he has a powerful ally.
He's a believer.
Yes, and he can use Dooku's beliefs and his desire to change things, but he wants to pervert it to what he wants. And I don't think initially, anyway, Dooku was thinking probably like that's perfectly said, like Luthen, like, okay, I got to do some bad stuff, but this change is going to be the right way, because I'm sure Palpatine at this point has shared with him some version of his vision of the future.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, if we do this, things could be better.
Mm-hmm.
Things could be, but as you said, Palpatine at that point is just selling him or telling him what he wants to hear, probably, because Palpatine has his own plans. And I think if there's one part in the films which may circle back to the character we learn about in this show. It's right before Dooku's killed. Like when Palpatine says, "Do it." And like Dooku looks at him like, wait a second. I don't think this was part of the bargain.
Yeah, it adds a little more weight to that scene
Yeah.
now, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's like, what? And he's like, okay, well, you've served your purpose. I've got this guy. The guy who's going to cut your head off is way better than you.
God, could
Yep.
you imagine
Yeah.
being like, now that you're right, that's a great way of thinking about it. Like, I want to watch that scene again after we're done with this and just think about all those choices and sacrifices and compromises that Dooku had to make morally and to his own being to get that far to help push forward what he thought was like the plan, or not the plan, like what he believed, only to at that one moment to be like,
Yeah, no,
Nope.
dude,
I
lied to you. Peace.
Mhm.
And
God.
it also adds another layer to the scene in Attack of the Clones when he's talking to Obi-Wan, where he's saying things to him. If I hadn't seen these episodes, I would think he's just full of crap. But
Yeah, it's
some of
manipulated
it,
like a Sith.
but some of it seems very genuine when he's talking to Obi-Wan. Like,
Interesting.
hey, look, if we can destroy the Sith, because he wants Obi-Wan to join with him. It's like, look, we can go because I think at that point, a few years in, 10 years in, he realizes maybe that Palpatine and him are not playing the same game.
Yeah.
And he maybe he wants to try to, change what he can.
In
Yeah.
some ways, he probably wanted his own apprentice back in a way, because I mean that's what Obi-Wan kind of represents.
Yeah.
I mean, to him, it's Qui-Gon's apprentice, but it's kind of, it'd be like having Qui-Gon back.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a touch point back to Qui-Gon. Yeah.
And like you said, he basically gets himself there. Like Palpatine doesn't really manipulate him into believing the things he does. He just takes advantage of it. So it makes sense he would start to feel distance from what Palpatine's doing, where Anakin is just full on manipulated the entire time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really start till Palpatine starts being like,
Mhm.
I mean, it's
That's
obviously
true.
a little bit, but not like all like this like radical change in worldview. I feel like doesn't happen
And that's in this show.
quite as well gracefully.
And, in this show, there was no surprises with Ahsoka. Like what I learned from Ahsoka, it didn't surprise me. It just kind of fit into the character they already built for me. So I was glad to see the extra scenes. But like with the Dooku part, this Dooku stuff I had never had access to. I never got any of his real philosophy, or like these moments that you really see those pivotal moments where he turns and stuff, or where he starts to think and evaluate things differently. That's what made this show for me so special, because although I love Ahsoka and I loved getting all that extra stuff from her, I felt that it was already that was like stuff that I would have expected.
Mhm.
This stuff was truly original, and this was the best kind of white space fill for me with Dooku. And to be honest, Dooku was never one of my favorite characters from the prequels. I always thought he was kind of one-dimensional. I didn't get much from him. He had an interesting backstory that was teased but never filled out. So it was I was kind of like, well, whatever, it's Dooku. But this stuff gives him some real meat on the bones, and I'm more interested in Dooku after this, and it's
Mhm.
made him a real character for me. Finally, I feel like
what's
Dooku's interesting.
what's really interesting about this too is that if you could, kind of contrast this with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan was 4.5 hours long, and you really didn't gain a whole lot out of it for the most part, except for a cool lightsaber fight at the end. But they spent 45 minutes each on two characters, and you learned so much more about them and their journey than you ever did about Obi-Wan in 4.5 hours.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And it was the same constraints, like working in between stuff that you already know happens, working
Yeah.
in between character
Yeah.
moments and character development that you already know happens.
It also shows what a great writer, and like Dave Filoni
Yeah.
is, what he can
Yeah.
put together. And
it was also interesting watching this show. This show was released right in the middle of Andor's run,
Mhm.
and they are two very different flavors of Star Wars. But it showed me that this kind of storytelling, it's a big enough galaxy for both of these kind of stories. But you've got the grounded, very ground level grittiness of Andor, and then the sort of with the broad strokes of good and evil with the tales of the Jedi. But as we talked about in this episode, there's similarities between those two stories. And I thought it was really fascinating juxtaposition, especially the day this was released. They were both two, this was released on a Wednesday, the same as episode 6 or 7 of Andor. And it was a bit of a swing to watch them back to back, but that it still all felt like it was from the same world. Well, I got to say, go ahead, Brian. What do you got?
I was going to say, I hope that they do more of these.
Oh,
me too. I thought to do more. It was interesting that the way they did it. It was like timeline, like Ahsoka's born, and then all the Dooku stuff happens, and then and it's timeline wise. But it was interesting that it was just like a bunch of stuff with Dooku and his story, and then like the bread on the sandwich that was Ahsoka stuff, and that's all they did. Just a random idea for a season of a show to choose to do just those two things in that order. I was like, I never would have guessed, because I didn't look at anything before I watched this, and I never would have guessed when I was watching episode 2 that the next 3 were going to still be about Dooku. And
okay,
I'm going
to throw this out. I'll throw this out there. So if they have a season 2, which I hope they come out with, who do you want to have a tale of? Who do you want to learn more about? I'm going to start. I want to learn more about Sifo Dyas.
Sifo Dyas.
I want to learn what went on there.
It was Sifo Dyas he's the one who, we think made the initial order of the clones from Kamino. And they touch on his story a little bit in the Clone Wars. But it's.
And they say his name once in this show.
Yeah. Sifo Dyas, because Dooku uses his access code to delete all the Kamino stuff.
Right.
Yeah, Sifo Dyas isn't bad. I think I would take a bigger swing. I would like Yoda.
Yeah, or maybe some Mace Windu.
I was just gonna say Mace Windu, and I was also gonna say, I know they're everywhere and they're in everything, but Anakin and Obi-Wan, when he's training him to be a Jedi?
When he's younger?
Yeah. Younger, between being the Anakin we see in episode 2 and the one we see in episode 1. That's it was 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, that's a good space.
That's
how about
space.
This? Now, I've read Darth Plagueis went into some serious detail of the book, but it'd be interesting if they did half the show on Palpatine's rise too.
Well, one thing that I've heard, various people talk about is how about a Tales of the Sith? So you could see
Darth Plagueis, and
maybe you see Darth. You see that scene that Palpatine was talking about. He killed him in his sleep.
Ironic.
And you know how we've talked about some of this extra stuff has made the prequels better, has made stuff better in context. I wonder if they couldn't, in Palpatine's story, make the sequels just a little bit better. Just a little bit of context.
Well, I think
about his apparent child.
Well, I think. Look. I think.
My grandson.
I think what's happening.
Granddaughter.
Grandkids. Yeah. Whatever.
I think what's happening in The Mandalorian. Well, I think they've already started that in The Mandalorian, because they came upon some cloning tanks,
early clones,
and look, and I'm all for it. If they can make it work better, then go ahead and do it.
I think
they're not erasing those movies, no matter how many people want them to.
I think Disney has a mandate saying make them better. That's why The Mandalorian was created. The whole plot of The Mandalorian season 1 was to help tie you into the sequels. and make it a little more sensible.
I don't agree with that. I don't think
I do. I think there's a lot
what does that have to do with the sequels at all?
The Mandalorian, I think I think the Baby Yoda character and stealing the Baby Yoda's
his
blood
clone
helps propel the story to get you more in line with what happens in the sequels.
Mhm.
And I think you had a little bit of a mandate there from Disney saying make it more palpable for
if
the audience.
they can do it in an entertaining fashion and a way that makes narrative sense, then knock yourself out, because quite frankly, that's what the Clone Wars did for the prequels.
I think Dave Filoni, looking at the success of the Tales of the Jedi, I think it'd be great if you had Tales of the Sith. I think it just makes perfect sense. I think living in this timeline for Dave Filoni is his favorite spot to be. And I think if you let him go, you're going to get great stuff, especially in the animated world, which is really where he cut his teeth with Star Wars anyway.
Mhm.
And, this is where he made his bones of Star Wars, and this is where he lives best. So let him go and see what he can do. And I'll be honest, I think whatever he comes up with will probably be pretty damn entertaining, pretty good.
So, well,
I think they can be extra creative with these really short episodes too. They don't have to be like, okay, we gotta have a big plot and a big bad guy and a big little. It can just be good, contained, well written little vignettes.
Exactly. And what you're saying there is, it's a lesson that needs to. I think Disney in general is starting to learn this. Is that it just give me quality over quantity any day of the week. And it's tough for them to do that because they are once, like Star Wars and Marvel gets caught up, it's a conveyor belt. It's like, crank this stuff out. Come on, let's go. Whereas it wasn't like, I was telling Matt the other day, if using Marvel here for a moment, from 2008's Iron Man to the first Avengers movie, it was 4 years. Now, Marvel, if they went at that pace today, they'd be like, we're losing money.
Yeah.
We need 15 TV shows and 16 movies in the theater this year, or we're leaving money on the table. And I think, once Disney acquired these brands, and hopefully they're slowing it down, that it's just about, all right, what's the next thing? What do we got next? Come on. What are we doing? And one thing that Marvel has started doing is these one-shot specials, which most recently the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which was great, and everybody should watch it. But that tells a story, and it's a contained 45-minute thing that you don't need to drag out into 5 or 6 episodes.
Yeah.
So make these little mini movies, but don't give me Obi-Wan where it's 6 episodes of stuff where they could have told it in a movie, or Book of Boba Fett, same thing. Just do a 1-hour TV special with a big budget and put it on Disney Plus. Don't feel like you have to spread it over 6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this series here is a perfect example of great stories that, they tell, it's an hour and a half long. It's quality stuff. And we don't have to spread this out over 12 weeks to stretch it for when the next thing's ready, So hopefully that's kind of the way we're going. So,
hey, well, listen, I'll tell you what's going on. Season 6 Space is coming to a bit of a close soon. So I'm glad that everybody could be a part of this show. In this episode, we're going to thank Lindsey, our frequent co-host, and Brian the Collector, also one of our frequent co-hosts on this show. Star Wars guys, we're not done with Star Wars yet. There's still more stuff coming out that we're going to have to bring you back for. Bad Batch is just released.
Just around the corner.
And
Lindsey, you got some homework.
Let me tell you.
I think I will actually watch these. I think I just needed something to get into it.
Bad Batch is awesome.
Bad Batch is premiering in just a couple of weeks. Season 2.
If you're taking time off around Christmas, I suggest you just start watching the Clone Wars and Bad Batch. Just blaze right through it all.
But
You know,
we have a
it
couple
only
more
take you like
episodes.
2 weeks
Yeah, it's true.
straight.
But guys, we have a couple more weeks before we take a brief pause. And then, by the way, big announcement. We have the 100th episode of the Hyperspace coming up shortly. We've had a lot of episodes, but our mothership program, the Hyperspace, is releasing its 100th episode soon. So you got to tune in.
Is that the one where
Yeah.
Lindsey and I sign our contracts?
Yes, exactly.
Well,
tell Mike.
We'll see. Yeah,
We'll tell
Mike's-
Mike about that and see what he says.
He's still hanging in there as far as we know. So come back here soon. And like Matt said, we'll be taking some time off here over the holidays. But please, we got more Star Wars. You'll be hearing from Brian and Lindsey again. Faux show.
Can't wait.
So yeah. Thanks everybody. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.
You know you can't live without this content. So subscribe to the Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us next time as we take you into the 25th century.